It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. Salt and pepper and heavy D up in the limousine. Hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack, Mr. Magic Molly Mall. I let my tape rock till my tape pop. Smoking weed and bamboo.
All right, welcome everybody. It is the Fantasy Empire. We're 4 weeks into the season. That means we're 33% of the way through the FFPC regular season for main events and Fantasy Pros contests. We're over 25% of the way through the NFFC Prime and online championship contests. That's a long way. So most standalone leagues also over 25% done with the regular season. It gets late early, no doubt about it. Now things really kick into high gear because we have bye weeks going on. This week we have the Lions, the Chargers, the Eagles, and the Titans. So that's going to stress our rosters even further. Depth becomes even more critical. Being able to make those key pickups without sacrificing players who might be needed down the road, it's going to require a little creativity, a little finesse, and thinking multiple weeks in advance. So, guys, let's get into it. First, before we start our observations, I'm just going to real quickly, we haven't done this for a while, but introduce everybody. If you don't know who we are, we've got Chris Vaccaro just off to my left, right, whatever it is. And Chris is the original Fantasy Empire guy, and he has won hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know if I can say. I don't know if I can say how much. We don't want the IRS getting after him, but he's won a lot of money playing fantasy football. Just below me, I have Nelson Sousa, who is, if you play high stakes football, I'm sure on any format you probably know him as well. He has won multiple high stakes contests. We are also talking about figures the IRS doesn't really need to know about. And then lastly, Matt Modica, also big-time high-stakes winner, and he does baseball too, along with Nelson. I have ultimate respect for anybody who can do both of those sports at once. So that's fantastic. And then, of course, myself, hopefully you know by now, Dan Williamson, have done many high-stakes leagues, still waiting for that big payoff, but we're getting there. So let's get into the observations. Nelson, you want to lead us off?
Sure. So week 4 was interesting. It was a little bit better than week 3, I felt, but it's still on the lower end of scoring. I'm going to say my first observation was with Richardson going out and Flacco coming in. It was kind of amazing how the passing game for the Colts started to click. Richardson, on the first 2 drives, he did hit Pittman for some big yardage receptions. So who knows where he was headed with that game. It was on the positive side, but Flacco, now Josh Downs, I think, is in play here as we try to get through the bye weeks and everything. So it just seems like the passing game for the Colts is a lot better with Flacco at QB. Next observation is, man, I hate to say this because this is painful, but Brees, Bijan, and Achane, 3 guys that I think at the start of the year and even after week 1, we were pretty excited about. And my observation is just, it is what it is, but it doesn't look good 4 weeks into the season. Like, damn it. Like, these guys were high draft picks and I expect production out of them. And I like all 3 of them, but I can't make excuses for them. At the end of the day, that they got to get shit done, and they're not getting it done. And if anything, Braylon Allen and Algier this past week, looked better than them, if I'm being honest. So that's another observation that worries me a little bit. The next one, we've been saying it now for a couple of weeks, and I think everyone has this observation, is the Dolphins' offense is just shit. It's. I thought with Tyler Huntley, things would look a little better because he's a mobile quarterback. They can do some different things with the RPO, and I'm a little disappointed in Mike McDaniel. I thought he was a better play caller and and a better coach than maybe we're giving him credit for. So I think it might be time to start questioning just how good of a coach he is, because with Tyler Huntley, here's the thing. Like, I know that you were hamstrung, McDaniel, with, Skylar Thompson at quarterback and everything, but with Huntley, just nothing downfield. Like everything was all along the line of scrimmage. It was a lot of these little gimmicks, screen passes, and that's just very easy for the defense to defend. So I thought that eventually he was just going to start pushing things downfield with Tyreek and Waddle, and it didn't happen. So really disappointed, and now I'm full-fledged worried about the offense. I had hope with Huntley, but I think things are looking ugly for Tyreek, Achane, and Waddle. My next observation was kind of like the DeAndre Swift, Chase Brown combo. These guys were probably on all our benches this week, and they looked really, really good this week. So I was kind of excited to see that, and I think that there's a lot of positive to come from that from week 4. And then the last one that I had was just the Kareem Hunt usage after Carson Steele fumbled. And I'm going to say that I think moving forward, it's going to be the Kareem Hunt show. And Steele is probably a guy that is not usable moving forward.
All right, sounds good. Matt, you're up.
For me, it's simple. The chaos and the carnage and NFL tradition like no other. 9 of the top 20 wide receivers drafted by ADP have either missed games or their quarterbacks have been injured as well. That doesn't even account for the Rashee Rice horrific scene on Sunday. 2, old man strength. The aging running backs dominated the first quarter of the season. Can they survive the season? Obviously, as Nelson mentioned, Brees and Bijan concern levels are way up. I know last week people told me, do not panic, don't freak out. I said, you got to be at least a bit concerned on Brees. What happened, number 3, what happened to the passing to the running back? It was something that has been declining, but Monday Night Football, you had 3 dynamic pass-catching running backs, Achane, Gibbs, and Spears. They totaled for 5 targets, 5 catches, and 14 yards. I don't know what the hell's going on there. P. Ryan with the Chiefs, I don't know why he's not being used in the pass game. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm holding another week to see if that does become a thing. Guy caught over 50 balls last year, led the league in yards per route run as a running back receiver. So we'll see what happens there. Number 4, Darnold, Geno, and Baker, the quarterbacks you didn't know you needed this year. We'll get into that later. And the number 5 point for me is the Denver backfield. It's been underwhelming. Tyler Bidet, who was injured early. My thesis last week, spent about $20 to $60 on him. The reason I went in on him is I thought he would get a chance. And early on, he did. He caught 2 passes, negative yards. He had the run where he got hit. He was hurt, got taken to the sideline, taken off on a stretcher. So, somebody in this backfield is going to emerge. Javonte Williams looked better. Even Jaleel looked better. But is estimated the guy in the end, because for the playoffs, they are Colts, at the Chargers, and at the Bengals. So this is a backfield we all were targeting for a reason.
All right, sounds good. Chris, you're up.
Yeah, guys. We, all great points on all those. Nelson, the Colts passing game was one of mine as well. If Richardson's going to miss some time, let's see what Pittman and Downs all of a sudden can do. My top 5 observations: 1, the arrows pointing down on Kyler Murray. After these last few weeks in dream spots versus the Lions' pass defense and the Commanders' pass defense, we had high hopes for him. I was all in on Kyler, my most owned quarterback. To me, watching the games the last few weeks, I noticed it in week 3. He started limping a lot. He was limping around back to the huddle. This week, he was limping the whole game, and I think that shows in the box score. Only one time he took off and ran for 3 measly yards. Something to keep your eye on, but not thrilled with Kyler Murray here. Second observation, the whole group of wide receivers that were everyone's wide receiver 4 and 5 targets in draft dating back to draft day in that 80 to 100 overall. The Jamison Williams, the Brian Thomas, the Khalil Shakirs, Jordan Addison, Ladd McConkey, who I have high hopes for going forward, and Romeo Dobbs, same thing. These guys were all hits in that area to me. So I think that's going to be a big boost for teams that grabbed one of these guys as your wide receiver 4 or 5. Bullet 3, Chase Brown looked really good to me for a second week in a row. Monday night in week 3, he started looking really good. They gave him more of an opportunity here in week 4, and he took it and ran. And I think he's back into our good graces here. I think we can use him as an RB2 flex going forward. And I think this backfield slowly starts to switch over to more of an even 50-50 split, or hopefully down the road, Chase Brown has the advantage in the backfield because, as Nelson likes to say, he's got the juice out of the two of them. My fourth point is the late round QB guys, just like Matty Moe said, they're off to the hot starts right now. Jaden Daniels, Sam Darnold, Dak, Fields, Baker, Goff, Geno. If you built a team around these guys and waited on quarterback right now, you might have the winning formula here. There's no disadvantage to having these guys at the top of your lineup every week compared to the elite guys as of now. Now, does that change as the season goes on? I don't know. But right now, that was the way to go. Last bullet for me, I got to get out from this Caleb and Bears offense going forward before it sinks my teams. It's just not what it's going to be. Maybe it turns into something more once Caleb gets going, but I can't, along with other offenses like Miami and the Kansas City Chiefs, I can't let what happened on draft day sink my teams going forward. So I got to make that decision. Dan, what do you got?
All right, I have one more specific observation. Then I have 4 that I made just kind of as I was looking through my own process and kind of taking stock of the first 4 weeks. My more specific one is Trevor Lawrence is doing the least with his surrounding talent of any quarterback out there. It's just awful. They can't even get garbage time points. But he does have some great skill people around him. So if he can actually get it back together, those are guys who are probably going to pop pretty quick. It's really tough to play him. Other things I had. Number 2, reacting to this week's hottest waiver wire ads is an addiction I just can't afford for long. I'm going to be happier in the long run if I'm resisting the temptation, shifting my focus to who might be next week's hot ad and going with that. If I need a player, I got to go for it, of course. But if I'm just looking to keep my bench fresh, the look ahead ad is really the way to go. Like I got some Xavier Legette. He was almost free. Those are the kind of moves I need to be making more of, and a little bit less chasing the Tyler Baddies and all of that. Number 3, reputation. We're getting to the point of the season where it's got to be discarded in favor of whatever's working or isn't working. In some cases, I gotta stop trying to make fetch happen. Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts, I'm looking at you guys. I'm going to be starting Zach Ertz, Pat Freiermuth, guys like that instead. I mean, it's just, I got to go with what's working. Number 4, I'm going to keep betting on talent. I need to be thinking long and hard before I spend up for replacement level players. I need to make smaller bets when I can, i.e. Xavier Legette, nearly for free, and keep betting on that talent. And then lastly, teams are starting to tell us who they are. We got to listen a little bit. The Bills would much rather run than pass. When they do pass, they're going to spread it around. I need to take those things into account and make sure that my lineup reflects that as well. All right, guys, that's everybody's observations. Any comments on those real quick, or shall we pay some bills? All right, let's pay some bills.
DFS getting harder every year, but we're here to make it easier with the DFS Dominator, because I know a lot of optimizers keep coming out. Oh, our optimizer. What about this optimizer? But that optimizer. Well, we have a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Dario, Billy, the award-winning projections at playerprofiler.com, and builds the best lineups for cash games that have both upside and stability, because that's what you want. It's a couple clicks, boom, boom, boom. You get the best possible lineup for your cash games. But for tournaments, traditional optimizers don't work. That's why we have a Lineup Genius, which takes you through the process of building lineups the way they should be built. Which quarterbacks you want to be overweight on, then building stacks, then setting runbacks, then optimizing, and generating up to 150 lineups that you can easily import into DraftKings, into FanDuel. That's the DFS Dominator. It's only $45 a year, not a week, a year. Just go to Player Profiler, click on the DFS Dominator from the menu, and you won't be sorry.
All right, welcome back, everybody. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he's got some questions I think that we all need answers. So go ahead, take it, Chris.
Yeah, Dan, for all of us that are living in Pat Mahomes hell through the first 4 weeks of fantasy season here, it's now been 16 straight games for the Kansas City Chiefs not breaking 30 points, which is crazy. I mean, go on Twitter, you see all the crazy stats about the Chiefs and Mahomes' inefficiency. So my question to you guys is, going into week 5 here, it's time to jump ship, or else we're going to let Mahomes and this Chiefs offense, which we thought a month ago was going to be something special, and probably sink our teams here. So I want to throw out starters here, some quarterbacks going into week 5. You guys tell me yes, no, definitely yes, or definitely no on who you would start over Pat Mahomes this week for our listeners. All right. So let's go with Baker Mayfield Thursday night in Atlanta. Would you start him or Pat Mahomes? Matt, and we'll go around the horn.
I would start Baker. I think Baker has really shown it. He's got the receivers. Even Cade Otton is stepping up. And he has that pass catching back. Plus Bucky Irving looks like the guy for the goal line work.
Nelson?
No, listen, it sounded crazy, just a couple of weeks ago and, before the season started. But Baker's basically the number one scoring quarterback in fantasy right now. So, I think it's a no-brainer that you got to start him over Mahomes at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just said it. Go with what's working. Baker's working, Mahomes isn't. So I'm fine with that.
Okay, same game. Kirk Cousins at home versus Tampa secondary. Matt.
Oh, that's actually a really tough one because, Cousins does not look right to me. Against the Tampa secondary, I might lean that way. It's tough. I might still go Mahomes, though.
Nelson.
I'm gonna go Mahomes on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Dan.
Yeah, I think I'd go Mahomes there too. We just need to see it a little bit more from Kirk Cousins before we can start trusting him.
I think we'll all be yes on this next one. Justin Fields, real quick, right around the horn.
This week, yes, I would. I love the matchup. Their two best, players are out for like a month. So yeah, the best defensive players. Excuse me.
Yeah, for me, never again am I starting Mahomes over Fields. I have a bunch of Mahomes teams, and Fields was actually my backup quarterback on a lot of them, ironically, and that was pretty tilting looking at those box scores on my rosters. So Fields moving forward.
Yep.
Exactly the same for me as Nelson. I had the exact same situation. So many places where I had Fields behind Mahomes. I started Mahomes pretty much every time, and I have lived to regret it.
Yeah, and guys, you're preaching to the choir because I look down at my benches and I got Justin Fields and Sam Darnold as the backup on all my Mahomes teams, and it's tanking me. The difference in points when you add them up could be like about 100-point difference. through 4 weeks if you went with the backups over Mahomes. It's pretty crazy. I think we're all starting Geno at this point over Mahomes, especially versus the Giants secondary. Last one I'm going to give you, because I think this one's close, is Trevor Lawrence at home versus the Colts defense. Would you dare start Trevor Lawrence over Pat Mahomes?
I mean, on paper, it looks like Lawrence. I just personally, I can't do it. He's just been awful. I mean, he really has been that bad. He missed how many wide open, deep plays this week? You could say, well, the law averages, but he's had a pretty easy schedule and he hasn't looked good. So I'm going to stick Mahomes, but it's close again. But Mahomes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nelson.
What I thought with Lawrence was his potential sneaky rushing upside, and he's just not running. Even like in garbage time, I think Dan maybe mentioned it, that, we're just not getting any garbage points out of him when the Jaguars are losing. So I just don't, I can't trust him. I'm actually dropping him on teams.
Yeah, the Jags should be a fantasy carnival, and they just aren't because Lawrence has looked so bad. I cannot put him in over Mahomes for sure. I mean, a couple guys you didn't mention that I probably would put in over Mahomes. I'd put in Sam Darnold. I'd put in Brock Purdy. I think those are guys I'm probably going to start most weeks over Mahomes until something proves me wrong.
Yeah, I hear you. It's just, we've come through 4 weeks of the season, guys, and I just think it's time to take the names of some of these players out of our lineups and just, you get to a point now we can only sit there and look at our teams and go, we're falling too far behind, sticking with these Tyreek Hills, the Jalen Waddles, the Mahomes. We drafted them early. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes you just got to put these big names on your bench for a couple weeks until maybe they get their rhythm again, and then go back to them to save your season. Or else we're going to wake up one day, it's going to be week 8. We're going to be 200, 250 points out of the leaders in our leagues. And, I think we're all facing this in a lot of leagues. So that was the reason for the discussion, guys. Maybe Mahomes can get back on track. Nelson, what do you got, buddy?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, just to add, I'm a big proponent on, I call it like it's like almost like a whiplash effect, where you play your studs, they get you, zeros in your lineup, and then you sit them, and then they put up big games, and now you have them on the bench. So yeah, I will say we do have to make some tough choices in our lineups. I agree with that. But I also think that, like, sometimes on certain teams, you took that stud player, he got you in the hole, he's going to have to get me out of the hole, is kind of like my motto. So I try to be careful with, sitting like those stud players for that reason.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Nelson. I think it's just kind of, especially with Mahomes, it's gotten to the point where I need to see a week before I can start feeling confident throwing him back in there, because what we've seen is just it's become too much the norm, and I can't fight against that anymore because I've got to get something going every week, and honestly, going back to Trevor Lawrence, yeah, I'm with Nelson. If he was my backup, I'd be dropping him and looking for something else, anything else for a backup, especially for Mahomes. All right. Real quick, I just want to, this is kind of related. It's not on the show sheet, but let's just go around the horn real quick, starting with Chris. With Rashee Rice probably out for the season, are you back in on Travis Kelce, or is he still going to be kind of hit and miss? What are you thinking?
Am I back in on him? Yeah, I think there's going to be an uptick. But defense is going to have to focus on him now. So does that hurt more? You're starting him regardless, Dan. So it's not like he was going to your bench and now he's coming back into your starting lineup. There's just hope for more targets and more shine for him. That's the obvious, I think.
Yep, for sure. Matt?
I mean, for me, yeah, he has to be a guy that steps up. You got to think Worthy steps up. The other guys, I mean, I really don't see him. Watson, Juju's like a tight end right now. I mean, he knows the offense. He can't move. So I got to think a trade is coming for the reason that they're going for the 3-peat. That's the key here. And they know they have to do something.
they got to give Mahomes a chance to go back to the Super Bowl. They can't just say, here, listen, we're giving you this collection of garbage. Go make, chicken salad out of chicken shit again. They got to get on the phone with Tennessee and say, what do you want for DeAndre Hopkins? We'll flip you a 3rd round pick, 4th. I don't even care if they have to overpay. Not that I know none of us think that DeAndre Hopkins is a shell of like what he was, but at least bring a veteran like him into this offense. If you could go out and get Amari Cooper, then that's your move as well.
He's dirt cheap.
He's what?
He's dirt cheap. His contract, it'll only cost him like $900,000. And Deontay Johnson, why isn't he getting shipped there? Last year of his contract,
Yeah. I selfishly don't want Deontay Johnson to move. I don't think right now. I think he's good right where he is. But let the Red Rifle stay with him.
We'll turn into a pumpkin.
I think that
my
David
point is they
Tepper-
got to go get somebody.
Yeah, David Tepper is definitely going to hang on to like what he's got that's actually working, since it's been so long since he's seen anything actually work. Nelson, your thoughts on Kelsey?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is he's going to see an uptick in targets because those Rice targets have to go somewhere. But I actually think they're going to become a little more run heavy is my prediction. And I think eventually before the trade deadline, they are going to go out and get a veteran wide receiver to help complement this team. And I think guys like Cooper, Hopkins, and I could see Deontay because it was interesting listening to Adam Schefter was on a podcast. I think it might have been the McAfee show. And he made mention that, Deontay is basically as good as gone next year, that he wasn't planning on staying in Carolina. So I could see something like that for any team that's, not looking at making the playoffs this year, shipping out, a veteran wide receiver to Kansas City.
All right, makes sense. So let's kind of just shift the discussion a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about some bench players who can maybe help us out. Guys who can maybe tilt leagues at least, maybe even tilt contests. I'd like to know from you guys one stash player and one guy who's kind of a fringe starter already, who can be a league winner or a contest winner. If you want to go to the waiver wire, you can do that too if you dare. But let's get some guys on the back end of our benches. That we might either be kind of thrown in there occasionally already, or that have been just stashing hopes for now. So Matt, why don't you lead us off on this one?
I mean, for the quarterbacks, I think we covered it with Darnell Baker, Geno, and Fields if available. So I'll move on past that. It's the running backs that are interesting to me. Maybe I misread the question a little, but I'll just hit it up. Chase Brown, Spears, arrow pointing up. What happens with Chuba? The obvious are Brooks and Chubb being window opening. But it's the stash guys in Kendre, Vidal, and Estime that I think could possibly really make a difference at some point this season. I'm holding there. The wide receivers, listen, I mean, for me, this week we talk about lineups, and I saved it for this question. I didn't jump in a couple of minutes ago. This is why I went wide receiver heavy. And when you make the lineup question, like we talked about with the studs, like I had Josh Downs in on pretty much every lineup this week, and I took him out of a lot because Jordan Love was going to play, so I put Christian Watson in. Debo got active. I put Debo in. I took Downs out. I like Downs regardless of who the quarterback is. Him and A-Rich have that chemistry. That's his boy. Flacco looks fantastic, though, so we can keep Flacco in there with him. So, I mean, the wide receivers, you got the Addisons, the Downs, the Wicks, the Shaheed. And for the tight end, it's Kraft or Otten for me.
Matt, you named everybody in the NFL, buddy. We got nobody left.
I was trying to do pretty much about bench depth, and that's why, like, when we have 9 of the top 20 receivers getting wiped out in the first, this is what matters. And it's not about like your wide receiver 2 versus your wide receiver 6. It's about.
All right, you guys can skip me. Matt named every player.
Yeah, I got.
All right, Chris, go ahead. And if Matt took all your players, you can still mention.
Well, you can go a little more.
Let me dig deeper.
Let
me dig deeper past the Matt's 22 guys.
Go to the waiver wire.
My stash is I'm still stashing Garendo where I got him, and a couple Tank Bigsby shares as well, just because I see him, starting to get more involved. If ETN goes down, I think Tank Bigsby could be one of these league-winning running backs, topic right there. For me, Matty Moe's guy is Josh Downs. I've been preaching him for a month and a half now. My guy, Xavier Legette, finally came to fruition. He's sitting on all my benches. So I got him in a couple spots this past week. I was rewarded with 20 fantasy points, and the arrows pointed real high. I don't expect to see Thielen until November. So this is Xavier Legette locked into the wide receiver 2 spot here. He's going into all my lineups this upcoming week. So those are the guys I think that could be some league winners at running back and wide receiver if we're stashing them. The other guy, one more guy, I'm not going to go any further. Ty Chandler. I want a piece of this Vikings offense. And if something happens to Aaron Jones, and it usually does, Ty Chandler is going to be one of those guys down the stretch that you're glad you're sitting on your bench and that you could bring into your starting lineup. Nelson, what do you got?
So my fringe starter that I think could be a league winner is Chase Brown. I think it's one of those situations where Zach Moss is not completely, terrible, but there's a huge difference watching those guys carry the ball and every time they touch the ball. So if Chase Brown somehow, gets switched and it becomes like a 70-30, 60-40, I think Chase Brown could carry teams. And if something happened to Moss, I think he's, got the potential to win you your league. And then for like a bench stash, I think there's one guy that stands out to me that it has the most upside of any player, and that's Braylon Allen. So if something happened to Breece Hall, I think Braylon Allen would become Breece Hall. I think he would become basically like the top fantasy player this year.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to chip around the edges and see if I can mention a couple guys you didn't. Matt's list was so long, I don't remember if Bucky Irving got mentioned. But
no, we saved him for you, Dan. We had to leave you somebody, so Bucky's your guy.
All right, I'm going with Bucky. Because the thing is, I don't even think it takes an injury to Rashad White that he could pan out, and he's kind of on that same Chase Brown path. It's pretty clear who the better back is, and we just hope that the team recognizes it pretty quickly. And then for another fringe starter that definitely requires something else to happen, but man, if Derrick Henry goes down, Justice Hill is really looking like a league winner. He was a guy I kind of tacked on there. He was what I call a what the hell player. I just threw him on at 19th, 20th round. I've held on to him tight ever since, and he's definitely a guy who I'm going to continue to hang on to. And then I'm going to have to cheat a little bit as far as like the actual bench stashes. I'm going to say Jonathan Brooks because he hasn't done anything so far. We know that, but I think the time is coming. I think he's one of those players that as we get towards the end of the season, if you've been able to hold him, he could start like weeks 10 plus, really starting to take over that backfield. So he's somebody I like as well.
Real
guys,
quick,
I think one of the go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
No, just like the Andy Dalton stuff, and he's been tremendous. He's had 2 nice matchups now, but he's got at the Bears this weekend, and that's going to be something I'm really going to monitor because that Bears secondary is really good. So that's like a watermark, a little test for him. So just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, Dan. Yeah, no, I was just because you guys, Nelson mentioned Chase Brown, and I think that was the story of my week 4, and maybe you guys can chime in as well. Are you guys struggling really bad with pulling the plug on these lineup decisions? Like I pulled the plug on Chase Brown after last week after eating a couple of his bad games the first couple of weeks. I pulled him out of my lineup. I did the same thing with DeAndre Swift this past week, pulling him out of my lineup. I just feel like it's a reoccurring theme through 4 weeks is taking, these blow up games out of my lineup 1 week too early and getting punished for it. I don't know if you guys are experiencing the same thing I am. I mean, I don't even think they're bad lineup decisions. Like going into the week, they seem obvious, but they just blow up, and it just goes to the craziness of the first month of fantasy football so far. I don't know if how you guys feel about that.
No, I agree. I mean, I had the same problem. Cam Akers, the process was right. It just didn't work out. I don't know what's up with the Texans offense, but he had Jacksonville, so I went with him. Brown wasn't getting enough work. He looked good on Monday night. I'm heavily invested, and another 20-plus points on my bench. Him, down. I mean, my bench did really well this week, so at least that's encouraging.
Yep, definitely. All right, so let's talk about, we talked about it in general, but we've got some bye weeks coming up here. Again, just as a reminder, we've got the Lions, the Chargers, the Eagles, and the Titans coming up this week, and then we've got, I think, 4 more next week. So there's a few buys headed our way. I'm curious who you guys like that you think over the next couple weeks are going to be startable, that are kind of either fringe starters or non-starters for most of your teams. Every now and then we might be talking about people that are starting for some teams, but mostly let's try to stick to guys who are not actually getting a lot of, they're not entering a lot of starting lineups. So one running back, one wide receiver, and one tight end if he can, who can give us a spot start or two during the next couple weeks. Nelson, who do you got?
Yeah, so for me at running back, I actually think it's Trey Sermon, because I think Jonathan Taylor is going to end up missing some time with a high ankle sprain. They're saying it's mild, but I still think it's the same ankle from a year ago. So I think he misses some time, and you can plug him in the next couple of weeks. At wide receiver, I think it's basically Leggett and Trey Tucker. I think those two guys you can actually put in your lineup, and they're legit part of their offense, and they're getting targets. And then at quarterback, we've already talked about him, is Justin Fields, is one guy that I've got on a decent amount of teams, and I have starters or other quarterbacks that I drafted obviously higher than him, and they're just not performing. So he's a guy that I think can enter lineups.
Okay.
Okay. For me, running back, it's Bucky Irving. He seems to have gotten a role there. Can he further it? I don't think he'll take the passing downs. I mean, White's too good there. Bucky Irving for me at running back. Wide receiver, I think it became obvious with Watson's injury. It's Wicks, who had a really nice game despite dropping like 5 balls or something. I mean, He even had a touchdown, hit him off the shoulder pads. And at the tight end position, I had like 3 guys, but the one guy I'm going to pick here is Parkinson of the Rams, because he's running all the routes. He almost got a touchdown, and they really are struggling, with pass catching here. They got a couple of receivers, but until their mainstays come back, I think Parkinson stays involved.
Okay. Chris, who you got?
Well, I mean, I'm surprised the first two didn't mention this for running back, but bye week plays, Justice Hill's got to enter our starting lineup, I think, regardless right now. So he's sitting on a couple of my benches. Justice Hill at running back could play every week for me. And you might get lucky if the Ravens fall behind in a game. He might hit PPR1 territory, RB1 territory for that week. My wide receivers, I'm liking Jerry Jeudy again. I know that Jerry Jeudy, every year I go back to the well and I get punished, but he's running all the routes. He's out there. His schedule looks real nice the next 3 weeks. If you need bye week help, Washington secondary, Philly secondary, and Cincinnati secondary the next 3 weeks for Jeudy. Wicks and Dobbs, like Matty Moe said, for Green Bay, arrows are pointing up. If you can throw these guys in your lineups for the next couple of weeks while Watson's out, real good. Tight end, tight end is such good. Dan, you got any eligibility left for tight end? Can you run a couple 5 yards and out, or what do you got? For me, it's Cade Otton.
I need some new cleats.
Yeah, we'll get you up and ready. We'll put you through the ringer. Cade Otton, he's up over 80% routes run. And with McMillan maybe missing some time here, I think he's the clear third option in the passing game, a passing game that we all like. He went 6 for 52 on 9 targets. He's sitting on waiver wires everywhere. Nobody wants Cade Otton, but I think he could get you through the next couple weeks.
Okay. One guy I missed at tight end, guys, was Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, he's my other guy. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we're all in on this Green Bay offense going forward now with Love back and under center here. All these guys are going to be coming into our lineups.
Yeah, for sure. For me, for running back, I'm going to throw out Rico Dowdle. I mean, if I've got running backs with a pulse, for the most part, I haven't been starting Dowdle, but I think against Pittsburgh and Detroit, they're probably going to have to major on the passing game a little bit more. So I don't look for him to get a lot of carries, but I do think he's going to be the running back that's most involved. So if he can fall into the end zone and get a few receptions for me, things like that, I think he can, he can hold down the fort for a bye week. Tank Bigsby would be another one that I would throw out there, just if Etienne's injury seems to be holding him back. I think Bigsby can definitely pick up that slack. And then for wide receiver, I'm going to give one that I know that Nelson's going to absolutely hate, but Alan Lazard. I think he might be, startable in a pinch for sure. Somebody can get us through bye weeks. He's going to be playing the Vikings in London. The Vikings secondary definitely is giving up some yards and points, and then playing Buffalo, who is also, they're going to have to score points against Buffalo. So I see Lazard probably getting heavy usage. He's been basically, the second wide receiver there, the second target. And then at tight end, you guys mentioned both Tucker Kraft and Cade Otton, but I'll throw out Eric All just as a, kind of what the heck kind of guy. He's gotten 4 targets each week for the past 3 weeks. He plays the Giants in Cleveland the next 2 weeks. Something could happen there. But as we know, tight end's a wasteland, and I'm like one step away from going in myself. So I would definitely put in Eric All before me. Matt, what do you got?
Real quick question, kind of a selfish one, but others might have this too. In an FFPC Fantasy Pros League, Tank Bigsby is available. What kind of bag do you drop on that?
Oof.
Nelson, what do you got on that one? I know you're an FFPC bidder.
Yeah, so for Tank, I think you need to go somewhere in the 340 range in order to get him.
I would guess it's probably going to take even more than that to get him. I would take a look at who's got how much left for Fab in that league. Might give you a little bit more of an idea. Or if anybody's really, really hurting at running back and they have a lot of Fab, that would give you an idea. But I would say it's probably going to take 500 plus.
Yeah, I'd say, Matt, between 350 and 550 right there in that range, just because, he's a playable running back right off the waiver wire right away. You're seeing Carson Steele and those guys go for, and Roshan last week. I think you can use Roshan's prices last week, similar to Tank Bigsby, somebody that's going to maybe get 8 to 12 touches a game and could potentially take over as the lead guy. I'm not liking what I see out of ETN. So anytime any of us see, a running back that's going to be playing and it has maybe 30, 40% of the backfield right off the bat, that's somebody that's shark in the water right there on the Fab wire.
Cool.
All right. Sounds good. So we're talking about, players that you think are keepable, or usable through bye weeks. I'm curious, as we are going through and, adding players onto the end of our bench, we got to think about who to drop and who to not drop. So I'm curious which, we all went out there and we all had, kind of our favorite bench stashes that we drafted, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. And, for the most part, I'm guessing you guys are like me. You've held on to those guys this entire time. But is your patience wearing thin with anybody? I'm curious if there's one player you're going to hold tight onto, even though they really haven't done anything of note all season. And then if you have any players that are likely to hit the waiver wires as buys force you to take action at the bottom of your roster, and you're like, you know what, I can't really hold out hope anymore for this guy. I got to let him go. So I'll start off. I think the guy that I'm going to continue to hold, even though he really hasn't done anything, is Marshawn Lloyd. I know there's some concerning things about him, but I think the thing that I like the best about him is Green Bay has shown they're going to be using two running backs a lot, and if anything happens to either guy in front of him, whether we're talking Josh Jacobs or Emmanuel Wilson, I think Lloyd is going to get some run. I do think he's got the talent that if he can ever get past the injuries here, he can do some things. So he's a guy that I'm really trying to hold on to as tight as I can everywhere. It's tough when he's on IR, but I think he's worth it. The guy I'm dropping is Donta Foreman. I drafted him in quite a few places. And really he's only had one good week. We have Nick Chubb has, they've started the clock on him. So he's got 3 weeks either to get back or else they can't play him for the rest of the year. So that tells me they think Chubb is close. I don't know if Chubb's going to be any good or not, but I don't think Donta Foreman is going to be the guy who stops him from coming in and getting carries and all that. So Foreman is definitely hitting my drop list. Nelson, who you got?
Yeah, Foreman's a guy that I have over 30% of. So he's going to be an easy drop for me. Cam Akers is another guy that I'm going to be faced with some tough decisions with teams with bye weeks and injuries. I think, Mixon, I think, is back this week. And, he didn't show me enough upside these last 2 weeks. So I'm not too concerned about dropping him. So he's going to be another guy that I'm going to drop. And then the guy that I'm going to keep that has done absolutely, nothing is Blake Corum. He's a guy that I'm probably not ready to drop, but I think a lot of people are probably looking at it as, he's a nobody, but all it takes is that one Kyron injury. And I just don't think that Rivers is, all that special. I think Corum would enter into that offense and get most of the work there. So those are the guys that I'm dropping and a guy that I'm still holding tight.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is Kendre Miller. I was a believer before the injury, before Kamara's looked so fantastic. He's still got to survive the season. And again, I don't care what the coach said in the preseason. The pro is invested in him, and I think he's talented. So if he gets the opportunity, the guy I'm probably going to have to drop this week, again, piggyback off of Nelson, and I mentioned before, was Cam Akers. He just didn't get the work that I thought he could get prior to that. So it's going to be tough, but I'm probably going to have to say goodbye to him. I don't believe in Pierce, but Mixon is back.
Yeah. All good names, guys. Dan, that Marshawn Lloyd, I'll play the long game on Marshawn Lloyd as well. You give me a guy that I could stash in that Packers backfield for the long run. And, we're seeing it every week. Injuries happen. We might look up in week 12 and Marshawn Lloyd's a starting running back of the Green Bay Packers. For me, it's a guy that I have on all my benches, just sitting there. He hasn't done much all year, but I'm holding tight everywhere. I will not drop Tyrone Tracy. I'm going to stick with him. If Singletary goes down, I think Tracy moves right into RB2 territory with the Giants. Singletary's getting all the work. Tracy's starting to actually, the last few weeks, get more touches. I'm hoping that he establishes himself as that clear RB2, and his playing time gets upticks. My point is this, guys. I want to get this across, while we're talking about these stashes. Right now, as we get into the season, you should be trimming the fat, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position. Start dropping the Curtis Samuels, the Rashad Batemans, Elijah Moores, the guys that are your wide receiver 6 and 7s on your when you look at your roster across your leagues and you have 6 or 7 running backs, 6 and 7 receivers, if you have 5 solid wide receivers and a solid tight end, your running back room should have 9-10 guys rostered right now. And it should look like the Tyrone Tracy's, the Marshawn Lloyds, all these guys, because you're one hit away from bringing the Trey Sermons into your starting lineup, just like we said earlier. So, a Rashad Bateman's never going to make his way into your lineup. And if he does, you could go get him on the waiver wire during the week, a player like of his caliber. So trim the fat on your wide receiver room and load up. This is why at the high stakes level, you go to the waiver wire and you look at the running backs available. There's absolute dog shit, and it's because we're all just hoarding these guys, one after another. There's guys that I got Dylan Labe, stashed in a couple of teams still, and he doesn't even sniff the active roster. But you got to play the long game on these guys. So that would be Adam Thielen's another one. I'd drop Adam Thielen this week as well. I'm not waiting around for a 35-year-old wide receiver for November. So that's
Chris,
my point. Yeah, go ahead, Nelson. What do you got?
Do you drop Jalen McMillan?
Yeah, that's a great question right there, Nelson, because last week, going into this past week, I said, do I really want to do that? I have high hope. I like the kid. He was a guy that I drafted a lot in that round 13 to 15 range. I'm going to that's, you made, you said Cam Akers. I'm sorry. Cam Akers, you have to make a tough decision on. I think Jalen McMillan is the guy that I'm going to make a tough decision on this week. And I think I'm leaning towards dropping him in places that I want to go add a guy.
I dropped him this past weekend in some leagues where I was trying to get a bidet or stuff like that. I knew he probably wasn't playing Sunday. It's a short week. I think, if you drop him this week, you still have the opportunity to pick him back up. So as much as I love the talent and I still think he has a possible nice role if somebody gets injured, I think you can drop and possibly pick up.
I got one more guy on this topic, and I know I'm going against what I pretty much just said about stashing as many running backs as you can and dropping and trimming the fat at the wide receiver position. But the one running back that I own a ton of that I'm going to be looking into dropping, and I dropped one or two shares last week, Sam Pirine. And I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'd love to hear your impact on this. I'm giving up on, I don't want, what am I going to do? What are we going to do with a Sam Pirine with four guys in a backfield? You got Kareem Hunt, Steele, Pirine. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back, what are you going to do with a Sam Pirine? How are you ever going to get this guy into your starting lineup? So as much as we want to stash running backs, I don't see any hope for Sam Pirine anymore. I'd love to know what you guys feel about dropping him.
I think you hold one more week, and here's my reasoning. With Rice is out. Hunt is obviously the running back there that's going to get the majority of the work. I think Steele is dead and gone. He was three yards in a cloud of dust anyway. And at some point, I want to see if they're going to use the pass catching back. And for the same reasons I said earlier in the show, why I was high on this guy from what he did last year and what I think he can bring to this offense, especially now with no Rice, I'm going to hold one more week. But I totally understand if you have to drop him, for more of an upside type. I get that. But if I can, I'm holding one more week up here.
Well, one thing I want to make mention, this is a little bit off topic, but I think all four of us are willing to take chances with lineup decisions, add drops, betting on certain guys, certain players. One thing I find interesting now is like Twitter, for example, is just it's amazing how many like so-called analysts have like come out of the woodwork, and it's all about these hot takes. It's all about, they just throw shit against the wall. They see what sticks and trying to make a name for themselves. And I think that part is important, that for us, we're not necessarily just talking. It's what we're doing with our own lineups. So when we're talking here on this podcast and we're giving advice, it's because we have conviction behind it, because that's what we're actually doing with our lineups that, are worth thousands of dollars, whether it's a main event or a confined league. So I wanted to just point that out, that 2 weeks ago on this podcast, it was unanimous that we said we're not buying into Carson Steele, and he was going for $400 or $500 in leagues. And if people listen to us, you saved yourself a great deal of money. So I just wanted to pat ourselves on the back on that, because that was a consensus, decision that we all made in fading Steele. And at the end of the day, we'll own our mistakes too. Like I have no problem doing that. So I just wanted to point that out to the listeners.
Yeah, it's a hot take generation that we live in, especially on Twitter, Nelson.
And just to add a little bit to both Chris and Nelson's point, every team is its own entity, and it exists within a league that's also its own entity. So things, there are some places where I'm looking at P. Ryan, I'm going, I might have to drop him. There's other places where I look at him, I'm going, man, I got to hold on to him tight here. Same thing with McMillan. If I can afford to hold McMillan, I'll probably hold him. If I don't see anything better, and if I don't really need him, I don't really need the spot or whatever, those are going to be the places where I'm looking a couple weeks down the line and trying to figure out, if I've got the luxury to hold on to Jalen McMillan, I got to start looking at what happens in in weeks 7 and 8. Not just 5 and 6, but 7 and 8. Are there players I need to be looking to pick up there? So, every team, you've got to kind of make its decisions based on that team, not just kind of on some general, analyst X said I should make move Y.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Nelson's point about the Twitter takes and stuff like that. Look, I only play in one home league. That's my only trading league. But what I've learned is you always got to pay more to get whatever you want. When you see these buy low candidates and they're in the round 1 or 2, that's all BS. Because if you want to trade, like if you want to buy, say, Garrett Wilson, the Garrett Wilson owner isn't giving him away for free. He spent a first round or early second round pick on him. So I just laugh at those takes all the time. Yeah, of course, but you're not going to be willing to pay what it takes to get that guy in the end.
Good point. Let's I think we've covered a lot of the show here, but before we get out of here, I think we want to talk about some must starts for this week. Kind of deeper dive players are what we're looking for here. One at each position: a quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end if you can. But somebody that you wouldn't normally be starting, but either because of buys or injuries or whatever. If somebody found themselves in a real pickle and they either needed to pick somebody off the waiver wire in the bottom of their lineup, who you would feel good about starting. So, Matt, why don't you get us started on this one?
I went with Geno, as my quarterback. I know it's a short week, but I think it's a tasty matchup. I was really impressed with the Seahawks did. They got stopped on their last 2 drives, but they played well. And I had Jordan Mason in there. He was a guy that, you either drafted later or you picked up in fab before week 1. He gets the Cardinals, so there. And Josh Downs, as we've been talking about this whole time, he gets the Jacksonville secondary, regardless of who's quarterbacking for the Colts. I like him. And tight end, I will take one guy that went higher but has done absolutely nothing this year. I do think it is the Mark Andrews week. I do think the Ravens get him involved. Everybody's like bailing ship, which I get. I faded him, but I think he's going to get right this week.
I just after this past week, I was laughing because I just remember a guy double tapping Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts in a NFFC prime time, and that he probably starts, one at tight end and the other. And this week, getting a double bagel, what that guy's week must have looked like.
That's awful. Prayers up for that dude. All right, Chris, who you got?
I had Geno as well. So Matty covered everything. I'm loving this Seattle offense and the way Geno looks last night. What's crazy about that Seattle-Detroit masterpiece, and I wish, sidebar, that we could get some more of these type of games in our lives instead of me watching this complete trash through 4 weeks that most of these games break out into. Every time we sit down and watch a game that looks like, all right, this could be a shootout game, it never works out. You know, that Lions-Cardinals game last week, the Cardinals couldn't keep up with the Commanders this week, vice versa. There's a host of others, but you know, this game finally lived up to the hype last night with a back and forth with the Lions and Seahawks. But oddly enough, like nobody really went off other than Ken Walker. You know, Geno had an NFFC nice game, 27 points, but in that type of game, you would have thought he hit 40 points. So I like him. At running back, I'm going to go with Javonte Williams. You know, I think the topic for this, Dan, was, you know, guys that we want to get into our lineups this week that are a little under the radar, right?
Yes.
So Javonte Williams would be my guy. He started coming on late last week. He got 77 rushing yards. Maybe we leave the light on for Javonte and get him in as an RB2 this week. I have to say I'm going right back to DeAndre Swift after bailing on him last week versus Carolina. Get me Swift back in my lineups versus Carolina. Little under the radar. I'm going to go with Nelson's guy this week. I think Jordan Whittington for the Rams here versus that trash Packers secondary that's all beat up. He ran 90% of the routes. He had a nice game. I think, you know, people dropped him last week. I think you could either pick him up or slide him into your lineup this upcoming week, and he gives you, you know, one nice game. And then, you know, Matt said Mark Andrews. I think after a couple slow weeks, I'd get Isaiah Likely one more shot this week versus that Cincinnati secondary. That's if Likely doesn't get it done this week, then he's going to go right back to my benches where he should have been for the last couple, I think.
All right. I like those. I'm going to dig a little deep at quarterback. I mean, you know, guys, come on, Geno Smith. We should be starting him by now, right?
Hey, Dan, he was an 18th rounder last month, so
I know.
I mean,
I'm giving you shit. So just because my names are deeper than yours, so. And I can. I'm gonna go with you know, Joe Flacco. I think if he plays versus Jacksonville, it's an easy spot to put him in there. Honestly, I might start him over Mahomes. Don't hold me to that, but I would think about it. At running back,
the year. Wait, timeout, Dan. The year is 2024, and in fantasy, we're starting Joe Flacco over Pat Mahomes.
Like I said, don't hold me to that, but I would think about it.
I won't hold you to that. I'll let you come to your senses. I'm not going down with Joe Flacco. Give me my fourth round pick.
This is straight vodka, guys, so that's my excuse.
I think it might be. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
All right, yeah, and I had the same running back as you, Chris. For better or worse, I'm ready to be hurt again by DeAndre Swift. I really have the feel that, you know, I'm going to put him in there in a few leagues, and I know I'm going to get hurt, but it worked last week. Hopefully they unlocked something. Hopefully they got some things figured out. The matchup is good. Wide receiver, one name we haven't really talked about, Wan'Dale Robinson. You know, the guy is just a PPR magnet because basically the passing offense runs through two guys, Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, and Neighbors has a concussion. Hopefully Neighbors is fine, but even if he's not, I mean, you know, Robinson is just vacuuming up all those underneath targets. You know, and we had a big discussion on Twitter or X or whatever about, you know, PPR is such a terrible format because of players like Wan'Dale Robinson. Well, hey, I mean, you know, that's what the rules are. So, you know, we play by the rules. You look for players that can exploit those rules. You get 1 point per catch and, you know, and 0.3 for the 3 yards that he earned. He gets 1.3 points versus, you know, running back who breaks 8 tackles to get 13 yards on the ground and they get the same amount of points. Well, that's why you go out there and you get Wan'Dale Robinson in your lineup because it works. And then finally, Tyler Conklin versus the Vikings in London. The Vikings are not very good versus a tight end. They've been getting gashed pretty regularly by every tight end they've faced. Conklin is a usable part of that Jets lineup, so he's somebody that I wouldn't mind throwing into lineups at all if I need to. And basically at tight end, we pretty much all need to all the time. So Conklin looks good to me. Nelson, why don't you wrap us up here?
I like the Joe Flacco call. He was going to be a guy that I was going to be targeting this Wednesday and picking him up on some of my weak quarterback teams or Jalen Hurts teams. The other guy I'll give you is Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
I know it looks ugly, but I think it's a good matchup, and I'm willing to trust him. And I'm going to do kind of like a mini stack, and I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy as the guy to lock in at wide receiver with him. At running back, you guys listen. It's the Swift train, baby. I'm going back on DeAndre Swift.
Ready to hurt again.
Yep. Ready for Khalil Herbert to get back involved in the game for no apparent reason, and Swift to put up single digits for us. But listen, it was very encouraging what happened this past week. I think maybe the coaches lit a fire under Swift's ass with all that Roshan talk, which, by the way, like I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I think I vented enough. But I mean, what a troll job that was by who was it? Jeremy Fowler from ESPN.
It happens all the time now. Every season, this happens more. It's like when one of these reporters come out and be like, this team's going to give this guy a real big look. 90% of the time over the last couple of years, it's a fake report and doesn't work out. I've noticed. Like, I can't even think of times that it was like, oh, wow, he was right. He called it.
Yeah, that totally screwed us.
In fairness, with the Swift Roshan, I mean, Swift was just god-awful. I mean, his success rate was, I think, 0% heading into last week. And he wasn't even that great in the first half. It was that second half that, he did it. He does have the Panthers, so I can see doing it here. I'm still not the biggest Swift guy.
It's the madness of fantasy through the first 4 weeks. These games from players are coming out of nowhere. These guys some players look absolutely dead, and then the next week they blow up. There's guys that look like, oh my God, it's finally happening. He looks great, and then the next week he drops a 2. Like, guys, Zay Flowers this past week, this is what's killing me for 4 weeks. I'm living with great players in great spots, and they're giving me a 2, a 3, a 4. And I'm getting multiple guys like this in my lineups each week. And it makes it tough to break 130 points on those particular weeks when you have 2 different players in your lineup that drop a 2 or a 3 that are in a good spot. Rashee Rice, obviously he got hurt, but, you take a 0 and then your tight end chips in with 3 points, 4 points, a Kyle Pitts and a Mark Andrews. Your week is like sank at that point. There's no consistency anymore through first 4 weeks, with any of these players. I guess it's just me venting and being a little frustrated.
No, I think that makes sense because, the thing is, something like this Roshan news, it hit at exactly the right time. It was exactly what everybody wanted to hear. Everybody's frustrated with Swift. We figure that the Chicago coaching staff has to be frustrated with Swift. And this guy comes out and says, hey, yeah, they're going to give Roshan a look. It's like, man, they just chummed the waters, and then all of a sudden, the hook went in, and we all took the bait.
And we sent Swift, and it made sense, guys. Like, to Maddie's point, he hadn't done shit, through 3 weeks, and he hadn't looked all that great, out there. So, and then you get this report that they're going to give Roshan an extended look. Okay, shit, it makes sense. Sucks for me that I have, Swift. So everything pointed to you can't start Swift, because we would be sitting here today and saying, oh yeah, I started Swift. We'd be like, you donkey. Like, the writing was on the wall that you don't start Swift. He's looked bad. The report was that Roshan's going to get all these, this run. And what ended up happening was Herbert was the odd man out. They just eliminated him from the equation. Roshan continued kind of getting the same thing that we saw, his first week back once Travis Homer went on IR, and Swift just got more usage, if anything. So it was just mind-boggling, and it's a shame that report came out. And I was even a little worried last week about it because I had made mention about it that on Wednesday, I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do with Roshan and how much I'm going to spend. And you guys see my Fab article, and I was not in the range of what Roshan went for. He went for more money, and I was trying to figure out what the market was going to be on him and what I was willing to spend. Those are kind of like the two equations, on Wednesdays, what I try to decide is it worth it? And I felt like this backfield, I'm like, Roshan, I get it that they're saying he's going to get extended run, but I just don't see it. I don't see where he's just going to be the bell cow and they're going to eliminate two other guys. So I definitely didn't end up with like any Roshan Johnson, but I was worried about it because I was like, man, I could see this, I could see, paths to Roshan working out. And like I said, it was just very frustrating Sunday watching that and thinking that this report basically just screwed everyone over.
Yeah. And Nelson, okay, Matt, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just add this in because we're talking about the Bears here. It's Carolina this week, Jacksonville the following week, a bye at Washington, at Arizona. So if Swift's ever going to launch, can continue it going, it's now. But also, I think if it's only two backs, Roshan has a chance to be involved in a bye week with these matchups. He might even be playable as somebody you don't want to have to put in there, but you might have.
My take on the Swift thing, DeAndre Swift comes back in. He's starting to look now after last week. We have higher hopes for him catching the ball out of the backfield. But, I have to, hand up. I have to look back at my draft process. And, I said it last week. And so when we get things right, we got to say it. When we get things wrong, It's still early. But my whole plan of the big time bell cow with Breece Hall, Bijan, guys like that early on. Yeah, it's not looking good right now after week 4. Like Nelson said, it was a bad week for that especially. It's also been not the greatest first 4 weeks. And when you factor in the DeAndre Swifts, James Conner again with another big week, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard had really nice games. And the fall of the early round running backs, obviously the McCaffrey disaster, Hall, ETN not looking good, A-Chain, right now, Montgomery last night was solid. Those mid-round running backs and even a couple guys late, it's if you waited and you went, waited on quarterback and hit mid-round running backs, basically the 0 RB process and loaded up on wide receivers early. Right now, you're at the front of the line through September. That was the way to go.
Definitely. I just want to throw out one thing real quick. We do get a lot of questions in the comments, and we apologize, guys. We just a lot of times we don't really have time to get to all of them, or it's they're a little bit too specific or whatever. But I do want to point out there is a source that you can use to get those kind of answers. If you check out the high stakes package that Nelson has on FTN. There's a Discord there where you can ask any kind of questions you want. Nelson will get out there and answer them. Vlad Sedler is also on there, answers a lot of questions. I'm usually lurking about and answering questions from time to time as well. But it's just and there's a lot of sharp, high stakes players who are out there, and helping out by answering questions too. So it's a really great resource. I encourage you to check it out if you had. Nelson, you want to give us a little more info on that?
Yeah, I just think that it's a very useful tool where it's a sounding board sort of in the Discord chat where guys, it gives you an opportunity to get a consensus on like a lineup call, different decisions that you got to make, whether it's your dynasty league or redraft league. So I think that's a real useful tool. And then part of the package too is you get my Fab article and Vlad's Fab article which it gives you, two, like I said, I think, Vlad and I are probably have the best fab articles out there. And that's just my personal opinion. But it gives you two different points of view to really zero in if you're in a fab league on what guys you should be going after and what they possibly are going to cost. So I think that's another valuable tool.
Yeah, Nelson is doing God's work on that Discord. I mean, he's just nonstop answering questions. I mean, it pops up on my phone. I jump in there at times and scroll through. So shout out to him. And it really is. He answers tons of questions a day. But the one thing I'm going to look most forward to this weekend is who gets the goal line carry for the New York Jets. It was brought up in the press conference to Saleh. He said that Brees is still there back and all that. But if we go back to the previous Thursday night versus the Patriots, where Brees just got in, if Brees doesn't score that touchdown, we were having this conversation maybe last week. So now after this week, I want
Chris and I are already hurting. Okay, we're hurting from inside.
Yeah, I'm not sitting through. Listen, Matt, I'm not going to sit through this slander. I can't.
We are already
drafting this guy first overall, and I got to worry about coming out at the goal line.
That was asked. And,
I know listen.
As good as he's looked, how do you not go to this guy?
I joke because it is in something that a serious concern. Brees hasn't been able to punch it in, and Allen looks like the guy that could punch it in for them. So I'm just saying, as a Brees Hall owner, I think I'm already worried enough. I don't need to sit through Maddie, asking if it looks like Braylon Allen's going to get the goal line carries now.
That was just such an epic bombing that, like, you draft a guy in the top 5 overall and he gives you 3 fantasy points in a good matchup at home, 8-point favorite. There's nothing you could say and do. You just you eat it, you move on, and you wonder where the hell it all went wrong. But a bad game for Brees Hall should be 12 fantasy points. Nobody you drafting that early should have this type of performance where it's that bad, unless you're hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not giving up on Brees. That's what I want. I just had to ask that question because it was brought up in the press conference.
And I'll put it this way: the New York Jets spent less on Brees, relatively speaking, than what we did in fantasy. So they're probably less tied to Brees Hall being exceptional than we fantasy players are.
No, I'm not going to go that far, Dan. Listen, Brees Hall is special. Brees Hall
he's special. I get all that. I'm just
he's
saying
not going anywhere. I don't. Yeah, let's also remember weeks. Let's also remember weeks 1 through 3 here, okay, where we were all in love with the pick.
No, we can't do that.
Yes. We absolutely can. It's just I'm chalking up as a throwaway week, and that's it. And as for Bijan Robinson, he would have been over 20 fantasy points too without that bullshit holding call on the on the reply. Matty threw out his points looking forward to this week. I got 2. I'm benching Jalen Waddle going forward until Tua comes back. He's coming out of all my lineups. I was heavily invested into Waddle. It's been a disaster. I'm not going to put it on his shoulders. Obviously, it's the quarterback situation, but I think Tua comes back after their bye, week 8. But until then, Waddle's going to my benches. And on the gambling front, I'm backing up the bus. I can't believe that the Ravens are only 2-point favorites in Cincinnati. These two teams are on 2 totally different levels. I already moneylined the Ravens. You could take the minus the 2.5, whatever, but I'm all in on the Ravens in week 5 going into Cincinnati and establishing that it's their division.
Yeah, I love that pick.
Yeah, I think I echo Chris's thoughts with the Dolphins, and because basically every drop back, I kind of gave it the first quarter just to see how things were going, and then that's when I started really getting frustrated because I am invested in that Dolphin, and it was basically like, fuck this offense, man. Like it's so bad that yeah, you have to consider Waddle's a sit. You just got to sit him. The body language is terrible. He's super frustrated. And, Tyreek is like, it goes back to my rule of like, you just don't sit your first round studs. You just play them and you just deal with the nonsense. But I will say it's starting to look like, if you remember back years back with Antonio Brown with Pittsburgh and with Big Ben got hurt, and I forget who the guy was that was at quarterback, but essentially Antonio Brown went from a fantasy stud, like number one fantasy receiver, to unstartable, and it's starting to feel like that for Tyreek.
Yeah, I mean, basically Tyreek had that one. There was that one long pass that was just out of his reach. But that's what you've got to really be hoping for with Tyreek, is that they can get that. That one connection where he runs free and the quarterback can actually get him the ball.
And that's what's frustrating, Dan, is Huntley has the arm strength.
Right.
Unlike Tim Boyle and Skylar Thompson, like Huntley just flicks it. Like he's like a mini Lamar. Like he just flicks it and it goes far. So like I didn't understand like that whole first half of the game, all this like dink and dunk and screen passes rather than, stretch the field. Let the kid try to get comfortable and read the defense and use your speed. And I didn't get it. And it's like, okay, he missed him. Tyreek got behind the defender, and that would have made his game. Absolutely. But that's what I'm saying is, why wasn't there more opportunities to do that? Why was everything just, it was really vanilla. It was really frustrating to watch.
They did have a couple plays where they wanted to get the protection in. Yeah, they wanted to get the protection in and maybe go for, the deep shots. But that offensive line is such trash from Miami either that he's got no time back there to let Hill get down the field. But as for Waddle, there's no point in going out there. His upside is like 10 points. You might as well go try and play these weeks out as, all right, he's hurt. Act like he's hurt. I'll come see you in week 8 when Tua comes back. We'll start our season on Jalen Waddle at that point. But let me go to my bench. Hope there's a Xavier Legette, a Darnell Mooney there. My guys, that's a wide receiver 5 or 6. Come in here, get the job done for a few weeks, and then bring Waddle back in week 8. And I'm not opposed to Nelson, like you said. I know you. I know your outlook is you start your studs like week 1. To me, I don't think we can look at Tyreek Hill as Tyreek Hill right now. He's not our first round draft pick right now. This offense is absolute trash. Can you see Tyreek Hill right now, this next week or two, hitting for 25 points? With Huntley back there, I don't know if I can.
I totally get it, and I agree with you. The part that I just disagree is the fact that Huntley at least gives this offense some type of hope for Tyreek owners, because if he hits, like, listen, I didn't think you could outthrow Tyreek, okay, overthrow him, and he did. So, that tells me, like, if they can figure that out, that's all it takes with Tyreek is that one play, 80-yarder touchdown that makes your fantasy day, and I can't bench that upside.
Yeah, and to an extent, though, he's turned into
the toughest things we do as fantasy players.
He's turned into Jameson Williams. It's like you're just hoping for that one miracle bomb.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing. And that's a little bit of an oversimplification, because obviously, Tyreek Hill is still getting the end arounds, or they're still working him in on shorter stuff. He's getting way more targets, but it kind of feels that way. When you're running him out there in your lineup, you're like, I got to hope for that one big bomb. But I think to Nelson's point, Tyreek does touch the ball in a variety of other ways. He does have that game-breaking speed, so they're going to keep him involved in the offense. So it's tough to bench him, but he's kind of moved down in my pecking order to the point where if I had 4 legit other great starting options, I would put those in. I wouldn't feel bad at all about sitting Tyreek.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
Yeah.
Want to take us out of here, Dan?
All
Chris,
right.
were you going to add something else? Did you want to talk about Brees Hall?
One last parting shot.
Listen, I got
I'll
Brees
be up.
too.
I'll tell you what. I
got
know
Brees
you do,
too, so I
buddy.
can joke.
I know you do, buddy. And I'll be up nice and early on Sunday morning, the London game. It's not the best get right spot against this crazy Vikings defense that's looking solid, but let's hope for the Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson revival tour to start in week 5 over in London.
Well, I mean, hey, at least Brees got you 3 more points than Christian McCaffrey, so there is that.
This is true.
All right. So thanks, guys. On that note, such a positive note it was. But thanks for tuning in, and make sure you check us out next Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern every week. We'll be here. We'll run through it, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, and we'll try to figure out what's happening the next week. Also, if you're interested, be watching later this week. Myself and Scott Pianowski from Yahoo Sports, we're going to talk our way through what's happened so far this season and what to expect moving forward. Who's in our circle of trust and all of that. So that'll be right here on Fantasy Empire. We're gonna hijack the channel for that one quick one, and then return it by next Tuesday. So make sure, if you haven't done it, hit that like button, subscribe to the Player Profiler channel. Both of those things really help us out. If you're listening on the podcast, especially on iTunes, give the show a like there as well. Give it a 5-star review. Whatever you can do on that, we do appreciate it. And again, just a reminder, Nelson has that high stakes package on FTN. If you're looking for more specific advice that's really tailored towards your team, that's the place to go get it. So make sure you check that out as well. And until then, we just want to wish all our viewers and listeners good luck. Don't forget, we got that London game, so make sure that you get your lineups in early this week. And we will see you all next
No
week.
bitching about it either. I got an early start. Twitter. I'm on the West